Have you ever wondered what's really going on in your head when you fall in love? I mean, we talk about it like it's poetry or some kind of magic, but what does science have to say about it? Well, today, we're going to unpack the biology behind one of the greatest human experiences. So, what is it? Is it some mysterious magical force that just hits you out of nowhere? Or is it all just a predictable biological reaction happening inside your brain? That's the big question we're diving into, and trust me, the answer is way cooler than you might think. Okay, so scientists have known for a while about the chemical cocktail that comes with love. Your stress hormone, cortisol, it goes up. Oxytocin, that's the cuddle hormone, that goes up too. But then serotonin, which keeps you on an even keel, actually drops. And that's what can make you feel so obsessed. But here's the thing, these are just the symptoms. They don't tell us what actually causes it all to kick off. Well, the search for that cause took one researcher on a totally unexpected journey. The big breakthrough didn't come from a fancy, high-tech lab. Nope. It happened during a family vacation, all thanks to a casual chat that ended up revealing a massive clue. Picture this. The researcher is explaining all this complex biochemistry of love, and her 95-year-old grandmother just cuts her off with this. And that one sentence, that one moment, it completely changed the direction of the entire investigation. So this was Grandma's first piece of wisdom. Now, at first glance, it just sounds like, a classic old-fashioned warning you'd probably just brush off. But that little piece of advice was actually a critical piece of the biological puzzle. And here's part two of her theory. When she was asked how you can tell a man's in love, her answer wasn't about flowers or big romantic gestures. It was about one thing and one thing only: commitment. So these two ideas created a brand new hypothesis. The question was, could Grandma actually be right? So, with Grandma's theory in hand, it was time to turn to science. Now, there's a problem here. You can't exactly run controlled experiments on humans falling in love. It's kind of unethical to start injecting people with brain chemicals, right? So, researchers had to find the next best thing. And that solution was the monogamous prairie vole. Yeah, a little rodent. See, unlike most mammals, these little guys often mate for life. They show this exclusive pair bonding that really looks a lot like human romance, which makes them the perfect stand-in for studying the chemistry of love. So at first, they found that dopamine, the feel-good chemical, was a big part of it. If you block a vole's dopamine, they lose that loving feeling. But here's the problem. You also get a dopamine rush when you eat chocolate or when you win a level of Candy Crush. So clearly, it couldn't be the whole story. Something much deeper had to be going on for a feeling as huge as love. So, to crack the case, the researchers decided to focus on the female brain first. They knew they had to dig deeper than just dopamine, and they turned their attention to another super powerful hormone that's famous for bonding. And that hormone is oxytocin. You've probably heard of it as the cuddle hormone. It's what creates that unbelievably powerful bond between a mother and her child. But it's also absolutely essential for building trust and connection between adults. So how does it fit into romance? Well, in women, oxytocin levels build up slowly, gradually, through dating, kissing, building trust. But, and this is a huge but, during orgasm, those oxytocin levels don't just go up, they absolutely skyrocket. It's like a massive chemical bombing bomb goes off in the brain. And this brings us right back to Grandma's advice, doesn't it? When she said, "You girls jump into bed too quick, you fall in love," she was, without even knowing it, describing a very real neurochemical event. That gigantic surge of oxytocin can seriously accelerate feelings of attachment and love for a woman. Okay, but what about men? If oxytocin is the key, why isn't it exactly the same for them? Well, the investigation had to pivot to the male brain because it turns out a completely different chemical story is unfolding there. Here's why it's different. In a word, testosterone. You see, higher levels of testosterone in men can actually block the bonding effects of oxytocin. So for a man to form that same deep, lasting bond, his brain has to use a different chemical pathway. And that pathway relies on a hormone called vasopressin. It's chemically a lot like oxytocin, and it's absolutely central for creating monogamous bonds in males, all the way from prairie voles to humans. You can basically think of it as the male version of the bonding hormone. But here is the big catch with vasopressin, and it's the total opposite of what happens with oxytocin in women. A man's vasopressin levels go up with sexual stimulation, but then they actually drop right after sex. What that means is, for the bonding to really take hold, His brain needs time to literally build up the receptors for it to work. It's a slow, biological construction project. So at this point, we've basically proven Grandma's first point with science. But what about her second point? Remember what she said, you know he's in love when he commits? Could the act of commitment itself actually trigger a biological change? Well, check this out. This Harvard study is basically the smoking gun. Look at these results. Single men, as you'd guess, have high testosterone. Married men have lower levels. But the mind-blowing part is that men in committed, unmarried relationships had the exact same low testosterone levels as the married guys. The trigger wasn't a wedding ring. It was the psychological decision to commit. And why does this matter so much? Because when a man's testosterone drops, it's like a barrier in his brain comes down. It finally lets those bonding hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin get to work and really cement that deep, long-term feeling of being in love. Okay, so let's put all these puzzle pieces together. We've gone from Grandma's old-school wisdom to the brains of prairie voles and all the way back to human studies at Harvard. What's the final takeaway here? Well, it means there are two very distinct biological paths to love. For women, the fast track is often that massive oxytocin spike triggered by sex. And for men, it's a slower burn, a process triggered when the act of commitment causes their testosterone to drop, which then allows the bonding hormones to finally take over. Grandma was right on both counts. So after all the research, all the lab studies and data, the most important conclusion wasn't really just about hormones. It was the simple, undeniable fact that sometimes the oldest wisdom holds the deepest scientific truth. My grandmother is brilliant, and that's something to think about.